Secretary of State Marco Rubio is in Saudi Arabia ahead of key discussions about ending Russia's war with Ukraine. Now, those talks are expected to take place tomorrow and include several senior officials from the U.S. and Russia. Notably absent, though, is Ukraine. ABC's Christian Cordero has the details from Washington.
Today, U.S. officials arrived at what's expected to become the negotiating table to end Russia's war in Ukraine 1 week shy of its 3-year mark.
We're working very hard on it. It's a war that should have never started.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Special Envoy to the Middle East Steve Witkoff, and National Security Advisor Mike Waltz will participate in the peace talks tomorrow in Saudi Arabia. Across the table, Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, plus an aide to Vladimir Putin and the head of Russia's investment fund. Ukraine will not be there. They weren't invited.
Maybe there is something at the table, but not on our table. So I didn't see any invitations.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky over the weekend reiterated Ukraine will not accept a deal struck between the U.S. and Russia if they're left out of negotiations. President Trump was asked if he sees Ukraine as equal in the talks.
Do you view Ukraine as an equal member of this peace process?
It's an interesting question. I think they have to make peace. Their people are being killed.
The Trump administration, in a significant shift of support, has insisted an end to the war would require Ukraine concede land to Russia. Witkoff, ahead of tomorrow's talks with Russia, said it's still early.
And I'm not dismissive of the details. They're important. But I think the beginning here is trust building.
Ukraine has said they need security guarantees in the form of European troops or peacekeeping forces before they agree to any settlement with Russia. Now, Zelensky will also be in Saudi Arabia this week for a bilateral visit outside of these talks. Christian Cordero, ABC News, Washington.
Welcome back to Live Now from Fox as we continue to follow some breaking news out of Arizona. You are taking a look at some live aerial footage. We are following the latest regarding a deadly plane crash at Marana Regional Airport. Here's what we know so far, courtesy of our partners at Fox 10 in Phoenix. You can see that several investigators, law enforcement officials, first responders are there on the ground, as you can also see the aftermath of that crash. Fox 10 saying this: at least 2 people are dead following a mid-air plane collision at an airport northwest of Tucson. That's according to what we heard from police earlier today. The Marana Police Department saying the crash happened February 19th, today on Wednesday, at the Marana Regional Airport, located near Avra Valley and Senderio Roads. The police writing on Facebook, quote, 2 confirmed dead, and both planes were smaller fixed-wing single-engine planes. The Federal Aviation Administration says a Lancer collided midair with a Cessna 172 just before 8:30 a.m. local time. 2 people were on board each plane. The National Transportation Safety Board will lead the investigation into this crash. We're still waiting to hear who the victims are. Their identities have not been confirmed. According to the FAA, the Marana Regional Airport is an uncontrolled field, meaning the airport does not have an operating control tower. FAA goes on to say that pilots utilize a common traffic advisory frequency to regularly announce their position to other pilots who are in the airport's vicinity. The pilot in command is responsible for maintaining safe separation from other aircraft, and pilots operated into uncontrolled fields are still required to comply with all federal aviation regulations, including minimum visibilities, minimum safety altitudes, and right-of-way rules. You can see here that they have taped off what looks to be another one of these small planes, and you can see several other small planes there in this regional airport, as the FAA has said that it is an uncontrolled airport there. But there on the screen, you can see the aftermath as well. Perhaps some of the debris from that airplane that was involved in this crash. I do want to head out to some posts on X regarding the latest in this investigation. This first one from the National Transportation Safety Board newsroom saying that TSB is investigating a mid-air collision between Cessna 172S and Lancer 360 Mk2. And We're seeing here that our team down at Fox 10 in Phoenix, they are currently speaking with some of the police and investigators on the ground. Let's take this live.
Prior to 8:30 a.m., officers from the Marana Police Department and members from the Northwest Fire District responded here to the Marana Regional Airport in reference to a report of an aircraft down. Officers arrived on scene, and it was learned that 2 aircraft were involved in the collision. Unfortunately, 2 individuals were confirmed deceased. The investigation is in the early stages and is ongoing, and the NTSB is en route to further the investigation.
And according to the FAA, we found out that the 2 aircraft involved, it's a Lands Air aircraft and a Cessna 172. And the FAA also saying that there were 2 people on board each of the aircraft. 2 people passed. Now, the other 2 people, do we know anything about their conditions at this time?
From what I understand at this time is the other 2 involved are unharmed and they're doing okay.
Yeah, and again, all of this preliminary information, obviously this is happening as we speak. The FAA also describing this as an uncontrolled airspace, meaning there's no ATC control tower, meaning pilots have to communicate to each other about their positions via another type of frequency. We will continue to be here on scene and gather information at this time, but stay right here with Fox 10, both live on air and online for the latest details. Reporting live here in Marana, Lauren Clark, Fox 10 News.
President Trump is floating the idea of returning 20% of savings from Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency initiative directly to taxpayers, potentially putting thousands of dollars back in Americans' pockets. Speaking in Miami Beach, Trump said the proposal would send 20% of DOGE savings to citizens, while using another 20% to pay down the national debt. The idea comes after Musk responded to an investor's post advocating for the plan, saying he would, quote, check with the president. DOGE's exact savings remain unclear, but Musk has set a $1 trillion annual cost-cutting goal. His 100-person team has already shuttered the $50 billion USAID Foreign Aid Agency / the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau and cancel billions in federal contracts. Recent cuts include $1.9 billion in unneeded HUD funds, nearly $1.3 billion in Education Department grants, and a fresh push to rein in Pentagon spending. Investor James Fishback estimates that $2 trillion in cuts over 2 years could translate to $25,000 per taxpayer, meaning a 20% dividend could be worth around $5,000. Musk, however, hasn't committed to a specific payout, instead suggesting the savings could take the form of tax relief. He emphasized that DOGE's top priority remains reducing the deficit to curb inflation and lower interest rates. For now, the plan is just an idea, but one that could have major financial implications for American taxpayers. For more stories just like these, be sure to subscribe to the New York Post right here on YouTube.
It has been 1 month now since President Trump took the oath of office. Today, he's continuing to slash the federal workforce. ABC News has learned cuts at the IRS and to the Joint Chiefs of Staff are underway. ABC's Perry Rossum in Washington with more on the story.
As President Trump dramatically cuts the federal workforce, U.S. officials tell ABC News 2 members of the Joint Chiefs of Staff are on the Pentagon's list to possibly be fired. They are General C.Q. Brown, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and Admiral Lisa Franchetti, the chief of naval operations. It was General Brown who greeted Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth on his first day at the Pentagon. Hegseth asked if he would fire Brown.
Handle with it right now. Look forward to working with him.
Sources tell ABC News cuts are also being made at the IRS. More than 6,000 new employees are starting to be fired today, all during tax season.
I think our objective is to make sure that the employees that we pay are being productive and effective.
Elon Musk has set a goal of cutting $2 trillion in federal spending. Trump says he's considering giving 20% of savings directly to Americans.
There's even under consideration a new concept where we give 20% of the DOGE savings to American citizens and 20% goes to paying down debt, because the numbers are incredible, Elon.
That proposal would require congressional approval.
Well, this is all going to be worked on through the reconciliation process with Congress that's going underway right now. As you've seen, the Senate's moving a bill, the House is moving a bill. The president has great confidence in both chambers to deliver on his priorities.
Perry Rossum, ABC News, Washington.
Meanwhile, with tensions running high between the two countries, some Canadians are calling on their leaders to cut off power to the U.S. As Yvette Brand reports, others are urging negotiators to tear up a decades-old water treaty that ensures the U.S. gets reliable power.
A stunning vista, but not to Crystal Spicer.
It's devastating to look at.
That's because decades ago it was here that waters swallowed her family farm when this area was flooded.
I'll never forget the paradise it was before.
A fertile valley, First Nations lands, all lost to create a reservoir to control the water flow for downstream states.
I've always looked forward to the modernization or the termination of the treaty because it's been so unbalanced.
The Spicers fought for their home, less water fluctuations to preserve the fish, the river, seen by Trump as a faucet.
So you have millions of gallons of water pouring down from the north with the snow caps in Canada and all pouring down. And they have essentially a very large faucet.
These red dots represent just some of the 60 dams on the Columbia River Basin system, which provides more than 40% of all the hydroelectric power in the U.S.
I know Canada was compensated monetarily, but not enough for what Canada lost.
She says tearing up the treaty would help Canada push back against tariff and other threats.
And if Canada really wants to play hardball, Canada can say, we're serving notice of termination. We're going to run this river exactly how we want to run this river.
The BC minister in charge of treaty negotiations says the process would take 10 years and wouldn't help.
It wouldn't have much impact on the current situation, which is an immediate and vicious attack on Canadian sovereignty that we have to respond to.
I am in favor of it because we need control for our own objectives.
Spicer is all for terminating the treaty. As for Trump retaliation,
I would expect it, but I would hope that Canada would stand its ground.
She hopes at least the renegotiated, modernized treaty, which involved years of talks with First Nations and surrounding communities, will survive the latest turbulence coming from our southern neighbor. Yvette Brand, CBC News, Vancouver.
Oh, no. We are seeing for the first time the frightening crash landing of the Delta flight that rolled and ended up upside down in Toronto. This is Eyewitness News at 11 a.m. The video now part of the investigation. We are live with the breaking developments as we come on the air here for you. Good morning. This is Eyewitness News at 11. We're live on ABC 7, Hulu, and wherever you stream. I'm Philip Palmer. Giovanna is off today. We want to get right to ABC's Rena Roy. She is live in Toronto with what we're learning about the investigation. Plus, Rena, these images of the plane rolling on the runway, just incredible.
Yeah, just remarkable video, Philip. That's absolutely right. And we just heard from airport officials here a short time ago. They are calling the flight attendants heroes for getting all the passengers out safely. And it's being called a miracle that everyone survived.
New details emerging about the chaotic final moments of Delta Flight 4819. Investigators are reviewing this video of the jet as it came in for a landing at Toronto Pearson International Airport. Passenger John Nelson describing hitting the runway extremely hard.
It was just incredibly fast. There was a giant firewall down the side. I could actually feel the heat through the glass. And then we were going sideways. I'm not even sure how many times we tumbled.
Passengers hanging upside down in the cabin, held in by their seatbelts. In this video obtained by ABC News, crew members seen standing on the ceiling.
Drop it! Come on!
Helping passengers scramble to escape.
The crew of Delta Flight 4819 heroically led passengers to safety, evacuating a jet that had overturned on the runway on landing that was amidst smoke and fire. I thank each and every one of these heroes.
The Delta regional jet departed from Minneapolis Monday for Toronto with 76 passengers and 4 crew members, landing around 2 p.m. local time.
Just so you are, there's people outside walking around the aircraft there. Yeah, we've got it. The aircraft is upside down and burning.
Emergency crews racing to the plane as the dazed passengers escaped. 21 people injured and taken to the hospital, including a child, but amazingly, everyone survived.
Look at the hull. Look at that cabin. It's intact. That saved lives. If that cabin had broken apart, if the hull had broken apart, this probably would have had a much different outcome.
And the NTSB is assisting Canadian aviation officials as they work to determine the cause of this crash. Philip?
In Washington, Republicans in the House are contemplating significant cuts to Medicaid. However, this proposal is facing opposition from within their own ranks. Senator Joshua Hawley from Missouri has expressed concerns, stating that such cuts would negatively impact many individuals who supported President Donald Trump. Senator Hawley emphasized his agreement with political strategist Steve Bannon, who recently cautioned that the right should not drastically reduce Medicaid, as it also aids low-income Trump supporters. Hawley's stance adds another layer of complexity for Republicans as they strive to advance Trump's legislative agenda and extend the 2017 tax cuts. House Republicans are considering substantial spending reductions to offset the $4.5 trillion cost of the tax cuts over the next decade. These reductions are expected to include cuts to Medicaid, which currently covers medical expenses for approximately 72 million low-income Americans, including numerous children. Meanwhile, Senate Republicans are working on a more modest budget plan that prioritizes enhancing border security, defense, and energy policy, with plans to address tax cuts subsequently. The two chambers have yet to align on a unified strategy. Hawley acknowledged the challenges faced by his fellow Missouri Republican, Representative Jason Smith, who chairs the House Ways and Means Committee. Smith is tasked with identifying nearly $900 billion in spending cuts to help balance the tax reductions. I don't like the idea of massive Medicaid cuts. We should have no Medicare cuts of any kind, Hawley stated. In Missouri, voters expanded Medicaid in 2021 under the Affordable Care Act, adding an estimated 500,000 people to the program despite opposition from the state's GOP leadership. Broad cuts to Medicaid benefits could also present challenges for other Republican lawmakers representing lower income areas that Trump won in the 2024 presidential election. Last week, Representative Rob Bresnahan from Pennsylvania, a first-term moderate, expressed concern that proposed cuts to federal safety net programs might go too far. He noted that his district includes 200,000 Medicaid recipients. I ran for Congress under a promise of always doing what is best for the people of northeastern Pennsylvania, Bresnahan stated. If a bill is put in front of me that guts the benefits my neighbors rely on, I will not vote for it.
Breaking news to head to now regarding the federal corruption case against New York City Mayor Eric Adams. MSNBC legal correspondent Lisa Rubin joins me now. Lisa, get us up to speed. What did a judge just decide?
Judge Dale Ho of the Southern District of New York, Alley, is the same judge who held a hearing a couple of days ago on that motion to dismiss the Eric Adams indictment. Today, he has decided that the Eric Adams trial will be postponed indefinitely, but he has essentially called in reinforcements. He's asked the former Solicitor General of the United States, Paul Clement, to serve as an amicus or friend of the court and basically put himself in the position that the former prosecutors were in to make this more of an adversary process. You'll recall from the hearing a couple of days ago, both the Department of Justice, now through Emil Bovey, the acting Deputy Attorney General, and Eric Adams's lawyers, represented by Alex Spiro, they want this case to go away. And Judge Ho is essentially saying, I need to hear from somebody who might represent a different point of view, or at least a neutral point of view. He's asked for briefing, and in the meantime, that trial is on hold indefinitely.
So the trial is on hold, but what happens next here?
So he's asked for briefs by March 7th from all of the parties, and he has specifically enumerated 5 questions that he has for each side here. One of them is particularly interesting to me. He's asked them, to what extent is he allowed to consider materials outside the motion? That's a follow-up to a question he asked during the hearing. He's basically asking, am I allowed to take into consideration the various memos that the Department of Justice sent to Danielle Sassoon when it first directed her to dismiss the case? And then in response to her resignation, there have been a series of shifting explanations for why this case needs to be dismissed. There's also a follow-up tweet by the Chief of Staff to Attorney General Pam Bondi, Chad Mizell that takes a third and different set of considerations into account. The judge is asking, am I allowed to think about to what extent this is pretextual and whether what you're really trying to do is get Eric Adams to execute on your priorities in exchange for dismissing the indictment?
That is the question looming over all of this, politically and legally. Lisa Rubin, always so clear-eyed and pitch perfect in real time for us. Thank you.
National Institutes of Health in Bethesda decimated by another round of federal layoffs. Hundreds terminated at a time of a bird flu outbreak and other public health concerns.
And employees, they learned via email that their job was terminated. Fox 5's Julie Donaldson is live for us tonight. And Julie, we understand that you spoke to one of those workers that no longer has a job.
Yeah, it was weeks of uncertainty that started with the offer of deferred resignation for this one fired federal employee who asked to remain anonymous. But he, like many others, he moved to the area for the job to further his career, and he's now left wondering what is next. Now, approximately 1,200 NIH employees received that letter of termination between Saturday and Friday over the weekend. Now, the same language was used across the board, stating in part, unfortunately, the agency finds that you are not fit for continued employment because your ability, knowledge, and skills do not fit the agency's current needs, and your performance has not been adequate to justify further employment at the agency. What was your reaction?
I was pretty upset because I did the job to the best of my ability, and I met all the criteria for the skills required for my job, and I had perfect performance reviews, and I still was let go.
Now, while the terminated employee I talked to was on the job for less than a year, he came in with over 10 years' experience in his field. And while he doesn't want to reveal exactly what his role is for fear of retaliation and in hopes of getting his job back, he says many of those that were let go, they work to prevent diseases and to find cures, work he says is important for the health of America. Now, the letter states that they have a right to appeal within 30 days.
So some people are trying to appeal it, but since we're probationary employees, we don't have a lot of rights, which is why they kind of came after us, because we don't have the rights as someone who's already gone through this period, and we don't get any severance. And so, there's some lawsuits going out, but there's nothing immediately being done.
Now, a federal judge gave the green light for Trump's administration to continue with the mass firings of federal employees for now. Now, the ruling is temporary while the lawsuits play out in the court system. And the White House, they have defended the firing, saying it's necessary to reduce the size of the government, to cut spending, and to lower the deficit. Angie, Jim.